You're listening to When Isabel Met Aviva, a podcast about rom-coms, female-driven screenwriting, and how to break into the entertainment industry. I'm Aviva.
And I'm Isabel.
And thanks for tuning in today. We are chatting with a local filmmaker I met on the island where I live outside of Seattle. And her name is Rachel Noel James. And we had coffee recently and it was really inspiring. And then I thought that we should bring her on the show. So that's what's happening today.
Ooh, quick question for you that I think could be helpful for our audience as they are probably also always trying to network. How did you reach out to her to like have coffee with her?
Yeah. How did I? Now I'm blanking. Of course. This was like a couple months ago. I emailed I think this was through Instagram.
Okay.
I have to check my DMs, but I think so. I've known about Rachel since I like moved here because she's kind of the most like well-known filmmaker. She's actually making features on the islands. I live on Bainbridge, and it's a very small community. So people like mentioned her to me a while ago, and then I think it was Instagram, and then I said, I think I asked her to coffee. Now it's all a blur. But yeah, I think Instagram, and because I've been in more of like a networking mood lately of just asking people to coffee. I've done that a couple of times now recently.
That's awesome. You always inspire me. I feel like you're so good at the like social media networking, right? Just like talking to people on Twitter, like DMing people to have coffee. I feel like it is like you do kind of need to do that stuff to meet people. So you'll be taking a page out of your book soon.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's hard because it's like, this might surprise people, but I don't know. I feel more introvert. Like I feel like I'm more on the introverted side sometimes. It depends. Maybe I'm like, I don't really know what I am, but so it's kind of scary to like reach out to people, but it gets easier. I think the more you do it, if you're like scared to do this, just like after the first couple like coffees, you'll
start to feel more like comfortable.
Yeah,
I agree. That's so exciting. Well, I'm really excited to talk with her because she's an indie filmmaker, right? And I think like I don't know if other people listening can maybe relate to how I feel too, where it's like I'm always inspired by people who just like go for it and are just like, I'm just gonna write the films I want to write. I'm gonna just make them, like don't care what the industry says or if other people don't want to make them. Like I'm always inspired by that. So I'm excited to get to talk to somebody who's actually doing it.
Yeah. It's such a good reminder that, like you don't have to sit around and wait for someone to greenlight your project, even though it's like not easy to do, but it's easy to just want someone else to make the moves after you've written something.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah. So do you want to bring her?
Yeah.
Let's
on and we'll chat with Rachel.
Hi, Rachel. Thank you so much for chatting with us today. We're really excited to learn about your writing and your production company. And welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, I've heard so many great things about you because you two met in person, right? On Bainbridge or in Seattle?
Bainbridge. Yeah. Correct.
We did. And Isabel, where are you?
I'm in Los Angeles.
Okay.
Yeah. Awesome. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, Rachel, you were in LA before, right? Yeah.
Yep. 12 years.
Are you from like the Washington State area or?
Actually, originally I'm from Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah, so I've kind of bopped around. But my parents have lived up here for about 15 years. And so I was coming up to Washington to visit them and kind of fell in love with it.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. That was my first time when I went. I actually used to live in Seattle, but Aviva and I didn't know each other at the time. But I fell in love with the Pacific Northwest when I went there. So I can totally understand that. So I'm kind of curious, I guess, because Aviva, you said that you met Rachel. She was filming something, right? When
she'd made a couple projects that I'd heard about because I've been trying to meet more filmmakers and writers on the island rather than Seattle. So
yeah. Cool. Well, I would love to just hear a little bit about your background, Rachel, like kind of like, did you go to film school? Like, how did you get started? And kind of hear a little bit about your journey to where you are now.
Absolutely. So I was a theater major. I went to college in LA. I went to Occidental College.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And the vision was always that I wanted to act in film, but acting was like my primary focus. And so I focused on acting in college. I graduated. I kind of jumped, into the deep end with like all the auditioning and agents and the whole thing. And as I think so many of us do, I was like, give me 6 months and I'll be, series regular on the show. And that did not happen. It was kind of a grueling sort of reality check in terms of just the realities of that working actor life in LA, which is not easy. And it requires a tremendous amount of tenacity and patience and, driving all over and sitting in traffic. And for me, it was like the roles I was going out for, it's a saturated market when you're a young 20-something white girl, right? And there weren't a lot of roles that were that interesting for women. And I think that is starting to get better. But I found myself getting just creatively really frustrated, and that feeling of needing to wait for other people to give you opportunities to be creative just felt really difficult for me. And so I kind of in the middle of the waiting times, I taught myself how to use Final Draft, and I adapted a book into a script just to kind of teach myself about screenwriting, because I'd always loved creative writing in school and stuff, but I'd never really thought about it as anything I would pursue. So yeah, I adapted the script and I actually really enjoyed the process. And then I kind of fell into this opportunity through a class I was in, where I ended up partnering with this group of people and one woman in particular, and we basically co-wrote a script with roles for both of us. We produced it with this producer who was running the class, and I kind of got this like crash course in filmmaking on this first film where I did everything and I had no idea what I was doing. So it was one of those things where like everything that could go wrong did go wrong, but somehow, we managed to get that thing all the way across the finish line. We ran out of money. We found an investor. We took it to AFM. We sold it. And kind of going end to end through that process kind of was like, oh, wow. Okay, I can do this. Like I can create opportunities for myself. And so that was a really kind of aha moment for me. And from there, I kind of moved into this space of developing ideas and writing scripts that I wanted to get made, and really focused on the female perspective, female characters, because again, it was like I just wasn't seeing that much out there for women that was very interesting. And I wanted interesting roles for me and for other women. And I ended up connecting with Sienna Beckman, who's now my producing partner, around that idea. And we took a bunch of projects out in LA, and kind of were running into those same walls of like meeting after meeting was like, that went well. Why didn't anything come of it? Mm-hmm. Or why is this feeling so hard? And kind of that realization of like, oh, it's because we're women. That sucks. Nothing we can do about that. So we founded Emergence Films kind of again with that same ethos of we want to create a different way for diverse filmmakers to get their content out. And we want to be supportive of that. We want to be part of the solution because we've both felt firsthand problems with the current system. So that was kind of the inception. And then both kind of individually right around the same time, we both were like, we have to leave LA. And so I came up here and she went to London. And so for the last 7 years, we've been working kind of internationally and remotely. And we got 2 feature films greenlit and made up here on Bainbridge in the last 3 years, which is amazing. Those are now coming out into the world. And we've been working with other filmmakers developing their projects. We've been developing more of our own, and we're working on a program to support early career female filmmakers. So we're just continuing to, put that energy out there and see what we can make happen.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So cool. I love that. I feel like, Aviva and I were just talking a little bit earlier before you came on. I feel like for me personally, like that's definitely, I feel like I'm feeling that experience in Los Angeles, especially where like, I'm definitely working with a lot of men, and I'm definitely like being in, I don't know, like leaving meetings and stuff, just sort of feeling like, yeah, like why aren't things happening? And I don't know, I feel like a lot of people can probably relate to that. So I'm like glad that you're sharing that story too. But I'm kind of curious, like, do you feel like, I don't know, I feel like we talk, like people have that like idea a lot too. Like, do you feel like you need to be in Los Angeles, or does it really matter? Like at this, I feel like in this day and age, like you can kind of work and film anywhere. So I'm kind of curious to hear your thoughts on that.
I do think that when I first was moving out to LA in the early 2000s, like, yeah, I think you did. But it's changed so much and there's so much infrastructure. And honestly, right now, and I'm sure if you're out there, Isabel, you're feeling this, it's like, I feel like the whole industry is kind of like toppling right now. It's like at the highest level, they're doing layoffs and they're absorbing each other. And my manager continually, every time I talk to him, is like, you don't want to be inside this box right now. You don't want to be inside the system. Like, keep doing what you're doing outside the system, because nobody's greenlighting things. Nobody wants to spend money. Everyone's just kind of in this chaos space. And so I think my journey has very much been like on the independent outside of the studio system journey. And for me, it was when I moved up here that things really opened up. I was terrified to leave LA because I was really unhappy there, but I was so worried that it would mean the end of my career and all the things I'd worked for. But it proved to be the exact opposite. It was like moving up here, fresh energy, creative community of, people who support the arts. And it opened up doors and avenues to funding and to getting projects made in ways that are just not possible in LA, because you don't really have like community and small community in LA the way you do other places. And I think community involvement is such a huge part of independent filmmaking.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about, so your first project on the island was Ingress. Can you talk about, was it always the plan to make it when you were writing it, and just like how that came to be? And we were specifically interested in funding and how, how to finance these projects that are a little bit bigger than a short film,
Absolutely. So Ingress, I always wrote it with the intention of shooting it here, because it's just, once I had been up here, it was like that misty, foresty vibe. It just had to be. But, I'd been working on the script for a while. And when the script was done, I had just hit this wall with trying to fundraise for all these other projects where I was like, you know what? Screw it. Like, this is the film I'm not waiting for money on. I don't care. If I don't get any money, I will literally find a group of friends and shoot this on my iPhone on the weekends, and we'll figure it out, and I'll learn how to do everything. I don't care. We're making it. So that was my mentality. And actually, literally right before COVID hit, I assembled a small little team of people who I'd met on the island. We shot three scenes on my iPhone. And then COVID shut us down.
Yeah.
And that was obviously a blessing, because during the COVID years, I ended up meeting a lot of people and finding connections that led me to more money, that led me to do it at a bigger scale. And I'm so grateful. I mean, by bigger scale, it was still under $100,000, but it was more than $0, which allowed us to just up-level the production. But yeah, that was the project I was determined to make no matter what, because I was so tired of money being the thing that prevents you from moving forward, which is how we all feel. I know it's like every conversation I have, it's like, how do you freaking raise money? Because I'm ready to go. I have everything else. And it feels like such a barrier to moving forward. So I think my biggest advice or takeaway from my experience with Ingress is, for that first feature project, moving from shorts to features, you can do it for much less than you think you need. So for example, Ingress on paper is probably a $750,000 to much more looking project, because it has special effects and it has a lot of locations. And so if I'd given that to a line producer, they would have been like, you need $1 million minimum to make this. But I made it for less than 100,000 and it looks great. And I honestly, I don't feel like I was lacking anything that I wish I had. The key to it is thinking about the script in terms of resources rather than money, which is kind of a good brain exercise. So Aviva, I know you have this rom-com, right?
Yeah.
So if you look at your rom-com, you already live in the community where you want to shoot it. So it's like, if you take money off the table and you just literally look at the script and say, okay, what resources do I need? I need a house. I need food to feed the crew. I need an Alexa camera. I need a lighting kit. I need whatever, what are all the people and all of the things that I think I need to make this? And then before starting to think about, well, how much do they cost? Then it starts to be like, okay, who do I know? Who might have a barn? Who might have access to a lighting kit? Who has a camera? Actually, my cinematographer who I wanted to work with on this anyway, I know she has a camera. Yes. So I'm going to talk to her first and see if she's into the script. And so basically by starting there, that's the only way Ingress got made the way it did, because I had this community just rally around this project. We got all of our locations for free, including, the houses that we shot in. We had people in the community who literally made food for the crew. So I had a sign up sheet where people could like sign up for a couple days of the 15-day shoot. And they were like, I'll bring, you know, sandwiches from TNC today, or I'm going to make soup. And so like we got the majority of our meals covered that way. We had people, we did a program as part of the film, which we were kind of like a crash course in filmmaking. So we hired some keys, you know, our DP, our head gaffer, our whatever, our first AD. But then we brought in people from the community who had never done film before, but had always wanted to, or had done film years ago and wanted to just get back in and get some refresh. And so they came and did internships on the set, and we did a class for them before the film started. And then they kind of essentially got to shadow and hands-on learn on the set. And we paid them a little bit, you know, we paid everybody a little bit. We had some people who just volunteered their time because they didn't need the money, and that was huge. But basically we were able to scrape together enough money to pay everybody something. We were a SAG project. We did the SAG, you know, minimum. But it was that mentality of like community and resource first that helped me to realize like, oh, I don't need as much money as I thought I did. I just need things, because money's only value is in what it can buy or who it can pay for, right? It doesn't actually, like a pile of money on set does nothing for you. So it's like, if you can get those things without needing to pay for them, then that number comes down and down and down.
Yeah. Yeah. And the locations I thought were gorgeous. Like the houses, like that's so interesting that you got those for free, because yeah, it was not just like a beautiful architecture, I thought.
Yeah.
Like really beautiful.
Sure. Well, and one of them was my house, and that helps. So like if you have your parents or your house, and you can be like, great, we know we've got one, check that off list, you know?
Yeah. No, when I saw the film, it did inspire me about, you know, showcasing the island too, because I do feel like, I love living here, and it's so beautiful, and I've seen it very few times on film. So it's really nice.
And it's such a friendly community. And I mean, we keep it that way by being really good stewards, right? When we make films here, but like, currently you don't have to pay for permits here. Which is huge. Cool. And everyone is very welcoming and very, you know, as long as you're kind and you take care of their space and you set good expectations, like businesses, all kinds of people are still enthusiastic about film. And so it becomes much easier to have people agree to be part of things. You know, it's not like LA where they're like, oh, you're across the street from me, $5,000 for breathing my hair. You know, it's like, that's what it feels like.
And will you quickly just share what the log line of your project, so just people know? And it's on Amazon, right, to rent? That's where I rented it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so it's currently on Amazon in the US, as well as it's like Fandango at home and a few other TVODs. So it's called Ingress. It's a female-centric sci-fi film. It's about a woman who can move between parallel realities.
Cool.
And her husband tragically dies, and essentially the film is about her having to overcome past trauma to let herself travel through the multiverse again. She's looking for a reality where he's still alive.
Okay, that sounds awesome. That's really good.
I'd love to know what you think, Isabel, if you give it
a watch. Quick question, because I'm kind of curious. So, like, what happens after you finish a project like that? Like, how did you get it on Amazon? And
there's many ways that it can go. So we submitted to a bajillion festivals. We got into a handful, which is kind of the norm. I think I heard that these days the average is getting into 10% of the festivals you submit to, which is very low. But anyway, we got into some nice festivals. And then we DIY'd so much of this. So we ended up DIYing a theatrical release. And the way we did this, and I would highly recommend this to any independent filmmakers, is we reached out directly to art house theaters. Rather than trying to go to like the ArcLight or the big chains, we went to art house theaters and we essentially just said, hey, we have this film. We'd love to show it in your theater. Some of them said no, but a lot of them said, sure, yeah. And sometimes it would be like a small upfront fee. Sometimes it would be just a ticket split, 50-50, where we would do all the marketing. We would bring people in and then we'd split whatever box office 50-50. So we ended up doing 10 screens that way in several different cities, which allowed us to get some reviews and some press. And because, you know, that sort of theatrical thing unlocks a lot of that. And then from there, we did end up signing with a distributor for streaming worldwide. And they were the ones who got it out onto the streamers. But I will say, you know, the indie distributor market is equally fraught right now, and there's a lot of people doing that job who are not looking out for the filmmakers at all, and it just ends up being a place where the filmmakers essentially don't ever see any return. So it's a really, you have to do a lot of research. And one thing that I have learned, and we were prepared to do with Ingress, is you can actually get your film out on your own. If it's just going to be like Amazon, Tubi, kind of those streamers, there are aggregates like FilmHub where you as a filmmaker can put your film up on FilmHub, and then FilmHub essentially blasts it to all the streamers around the world, and they'll be like, oh, I'll take it, I'll take it, I'll take it. And then quarter over quarter, you will get a breakdown of, you know, who's watched it, how much money you've made, and it comes straight to you. And I think they take a small percentage. I think it's like 10% or something, but usually you're paying 25% to a distributor, sometimes an additional 20% to a sales agent. Oh, and if all that distributor is going to do is put it out through an aggregate anyway, you might as well retain the rights to your film, because they also will tie up the rights to your film for 7 years or more sometimes. And so I'm a big advocate for that. And, you know, if you get a deal with a distributor where they're getting it out in a bigger way than you can, fantastic, absolutely worth it. But if it's one of these distributors that's like, yeah, I'm just going to put it up on Amazon and Apple TV, iTunes for you, it's something to think about, because it does end up being a lot of money you're leaving at the door for gatekeepers who don't really market it, don't really do any work. You're doing all the work anyway. So I think as filmmakers, we have to educate ourselves, because there's a lot of gatekeepers in this business who I think are, right now in particular, it's like, I just don't see the need anymore. It creates dilution, and it just takes money out of the filmmakers' pockets, honestly, at the end of the day.
Was Inheritance, was that a bigger scale project for you?
Yeah, so that one we scaled up. We had about a $675,000 budget. So it was a pretty substantial increase from Ingress, still under $1 million. And it's just funny, it's all relative, because we had some team members who came from the Hallmark world where everything's, you know, $1 million plus. And so they all were like, there's no way you can make a movie for 600,000. We were like, want to bet? We can sell it for 90. So it's kind of an interesting thing to bring those two worlds together. And then for people, some people came to set and were like, oh, wow, you have all the lights and you have like great equipment. And we're like, yeah, they were expecting, I don't know what they were expecting, but it's just interesting depending on where you come from, whether a budget feels big or a budget feels small. But for me, it was like, oh my gosh, we have so much more to play with. So we were able to get more days. We shot 5 more days than we shot Ingress, and we were able to expand our crew and pay everyone a better rate. And that was really nice.
Yeah. That's awesome. I still haven't seen that one, but it's going to be at the Bainbridge Film Festival that's coming up, right? So I'm going to try to see it then. I do really want to see it.
Yes, definitely come. It's playing on November 9th and November 10th. So
cool. Yeah, that's awesome.
Are you acting in any of your films still, or and are you, it sounds like you're writing, directing, and acting all of them,
and producing.
And producing. Wow.
Yeah. Yes, I am. So I actually did act in both of these films. I don't think I'll act in every single film. Like, I have produced films that I didn't act in. The directing and acting that I did in Ingress was super fun. I wouldn't do it on every project. I would definitely do it again, but not every time. So it kind of is project dependent, but I've really, because of the way my career trajectory has been, I've had the opportunity to do all of these different roles. And I think it's very freeing to have that, that capability, because I can kind of, you know, put a lot together on my own. But yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I wish
I could one.
But I don't think
I know. Yeah. But like, between all of those like parts of you, like, is there one that like you are like most excited when you're like producing or directing or writing? Is there one that you feel like the most called to?
It's definitely the creative side for me. I think producing is something I'm really good at, because I have this kind of type A, you know, hyper organized side of me. So I'm very good at it, but I don't love it. I like aspects of it. I like being in the room and helping make decisions and stuff. But I think for me, it's the writing, acting, directing trifecta that I really love. And they're really, at this point, like, acting was my first love, and there's something about acting that just nothing else touches. But I love writing so much, and I love directing. So it's kind of like, rather than segmenting and saying I'd really love to just do this one, I think over the last, you know, 5-6 years, what I realized is like, it's really all of it, and all of them in my opinion, really feed each other. I think being a director makes you a better actor. Being a writer makes you a better director. It's like they're all very interrelated. And it just gives you a perspective so that when you're stepping into any one of those roles, you've experienced and been on the other side. So it helps just kind of deepen the whole, connective tissue.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool.
Have you noticed too, like a difference in your creativity now, like being out of LA and then being like in Seattle area, or just kind of like, I mean, it just definitely sounds like there's maybe less pressure and more support.
Totally. I mean, for me, it's LA is so about the business. And I think by the time I left LA, I'd forgotten why I loved it, because I was so stressed out and disappointed and heartbroken about the way the business had gone for me. Coming up here, I think it's that thing about like putting your oxygen mask on. Like because I thought I had to be there, I was kind of like shoving a lot of things down that weren't working for me in terms of like the living environment. And so coming up here, where it was quiet and I could get out in nature and the pace was slower, it kind of just, it like opened up this space for creativity to come through again, and for like this all to come back as a creative expression and an art form first, instead of all that pressure to perform and make it into something. And that really unlocked it for me. Not to mention, I'm just a happier human here. And I think we discount how important that is. Like planting ourselves where we're happy, life grows much better from there, than being where we think we're supposed to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. My creativity got much better on the island too. I'm not just saying you have to be on Bainbridge, but like I wrote, I mean, it also was when the pandemic hit is when I was here, but I wrote so much more here. I just feel much calmer out here than even Seattle, which is not even as crazy as LA.
Completely. Yeah, I agree.
I'm kind of curious to know, because you said your partner in your production company lives in London. So like, how does that work? Like, how do you guys make the time difference work? And like, how often are you guys, I don't know, communicating on everything?
We have a standing meeting Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, where we've just figured out. So basically we meet earlier in the morning for me, like in the evening for her. And we just have like a 90-minute block that we always hold. And that's where we know we can schedule meetings. We have access to each other's calendars, so we can see when the other one's busy for booking meetings and stuff. It's actually not been as hard as you'd think. It's just once we got into that habit of like morning, evening, and then we build our schedules around it. It worked pretty well. And then we try to get together once a quarter, either she coming out here or me going out there. And this year we had a lot of opportunity because we were traveling for film festivals or screenings or different things. So we were together a lot. And then obviously when we're on productions, we're on set together. So, but yeah, I mean, as you know, it's like everything these days. The remote works pretty well for most things when you're just doing development stuff.
Mm-hmm. Do you have projects planned in LA or Europe to film there?
Not LA, because I just feel like, why would you film in LA? It's so expensive.
Or London.
We do have some projects that are slated with some UK-based filmmakers, writer-directors that are on our project slate that hopefully when they go will be somewhere in Europe or the UK, just depending on, they have some really great tax credits. And it's been cool having Sienna over there because it's kind of, sorry, Kitty.
Oh, we love an appearance of an animal.
There she is. Yeah, so we've, they have some really good tax incentives over there. And so we've been kind of getting to learn about, because it's very different the way things work in the UK and Europe, and just learning about those incentives and what money's available and how people are doing things over there has been really interesting.
Yeah. So just a general advice question. If for listeners right now who are thinking of, or they're tired of waiting around like we are.
I was going to say, it's like me.
Like we all are.
Yeah. Really us. What advice do you, like, how should we, Isabel and I both write feature rom-coms, comedies, usually not as many short films, but yeah, where should we begin? Is it too ambitious to start with a feature? I don't know.
I don't think it is. I mean, honestly, if you think about it, like a short, oftentimes, so Ingress we shot in 15 days. Most short shoots you do in 5, maybe 8 days. Mm-hmm. So you're halfway there already, right? And you might as well just kick it up and do the whole thing. I mean, they're long days and you have to just be prepared for that. But like you can do it in 12 or 15 days for that first feature. My biggest advice is like, you can do what I did and just be like, screw it, we're going to do this sci-fi, you know, special effects movie for no money. But if you're starting from a script phase, writing for locations you have, minimizing the number of characters and places that people need to be. The Duplass brothers have always been really inspiring to me in that regard, because they're the masters of the kind of mumblecore, low budget, really beautiful character stories, but there's like just in a car, or they're just in a house and it's 3 people or 2 people. And so that always helps you keep costs down. But I would say just write your feature and go make it. And like, you'll figure it out. You'll figure it out as you go. You know, you'll be surprised at who will rally around you to give you money. You'll be surprised at what resources will become available to you. And as long as you're willing to just go out and do it on your iPhone if needs be, you know, because the other thing is I think we can get really precious about projects and become perfectionistic about it. Your first film is never going to be something that you'll be like 10 years from now, like, this was my best work. I suppose it's possible, but most of us, we learn as we do, right? So like, you're going to walk your way through it. You're going to learn from it. You'll do better the next time. And so if you aren't too attached to that first film being your opus or being perfect, just that you make it is enough. And then you'll go make the next one. Because once you've done it once, it kind of unlocks this space of like, oh, okay, that was hard, but I know how to do it now. And so it's easier to envision doing the next one.
Yeah, it sounds really empowering for sure. Intimidating at this point, because we haven't done that. Besides, I made a short film like 12 years ago, but yeah.
Well, and you wrote a script for the place you live. And I think, you know, a lot of your locations are outside. You know, you've got a couple houses. Like, I feel like it's doable.
Thank you. Yeah, Rachel was kind enough to give me notes recently, so I have to incorporate those and do a new draft, which I'm resisting, but I agree with your notes. Sometimes I
know. Sometimes you're like, I don't want it. I'm right there with you.
This might be a silly question, but I'm kind of curious when you say like you'd be surprised about like who will like rally behind you and like give you money. Like, what exactly does that mean? Like applying for like grants, or like, I don't know, just asking like the local like film orgs in your town or something. Like, I think I actually work for a nonprofit right now, so my brain always does think in terms of like getting grant funding to do our projects. But when it comes to film, I guess I've just never thought about like there is a way to like get funding to make your films. But I think that could be helpful advice, right, for our audience to think through ways that you could seek funding.
Well, every project's different, but I mean, what I stumbled into coming up here, and I love hearing that you work for a nonprofit, because that's the world that kind of we opened up and found to be so wonderful in terms of looking at film as an art project, as a piece of art, rather than as a profit producing mechanism, right? Because the whole investment game for women, and especially early career women, as we all know, is incredibly hard, because we're a risky investment. And it doesn't even matter when we have a ton of experience, we're still risky. And I just run across this in so many conversations all the time, and it's absolutely maddening. And it's a bias that's really hard to overcome. And so what we found with these projects was a different avenue that was more focused toward donors and patrons and grants. And the way we did that is we got a fiscal sponsor for our project, which is something that, you know, any filmmaker can do, especially if it's a film that's got a message or is, you know, a diversity initiative like the Female Driven Project. So we got a fiscal sponsor in Washington State, specifically called Northwest Film Forum. There are other ones. I know there's a company called From the Heart Productions that does this specifically for film projects. And essentially what a fiscal sponsor does is they become your 501c3 umbrella, meaning you can apply for grants and donations that are tax deductible as a nonprofit, because it goes through your 501c3 umbrella. So that partner essentially will take in all the donations. They usually take a fee. So let's say someone gives you $100, they'll take $7 of those dollars and then give you the remaining 93. And then that money is a donation and not an investment, so you don't have to pay it back. They've already gotten their tax write-off. And then that means $1 of, you know, if you sell your film and you make $5, those are your $5, because you don't have to pay anybody back. So that's kind of massive. And I think film has become this weird outlier in the art space because of Hollywood and the whole mechanism with the studio system, which really owned this from its inception, which is, if you think about theater or opera or ballet or, you know, fine art, most of these are structured as donor-backed nonprofits because it's an artistic space of creative exploration, and it just has different priorities. And so for me, I got really excited about the idea of like, how can we bring film back into that space where it's people donating providing money to film as an art form, because media, like the film media, is one of the most influential art forms in the world. I mean, film and TV tells us what the world is, and it's been a very one-sided perspective. And so I think the impetus to get more diverse perspectives making movies is hugely important. And it's the kind of thing that organizations giving grants and giving money, are interested in. And that's what we found. So as far as the how, step 1, get a fiscal sponsor. Step 2, go out to coffee with 100 people. But basically, so Isabel, if you work in a nonprofit, where I would start first is whoever at your nonprofit is in charge of fundraising, like the director of whatever that title is. See if you can take them out to coffee and pick their brain and just say, I'm thinking about fundraising for this project. I just would love to know, like, how do you approach donors? Like, who do you, like, when you built your donor list, and like, is there anyone that you would consider introducing me to just to ask them questions, or anyone you think might be interested in something like this from your experience? That's where I started. When I first moved here, I'd met someone who did a lot of fundraising for nonprofits, had his own nonprofit. So I took him out to coffee. I kind of told him about my film and what I was up to. He introduced me to 3 people that he thought might be interested. I had coffee with the 3 of them. They introduced me to a couple people. I had coffees with them. Some gave me a little bit of money. Some gave me advice. Some gave me an introduction to someone else. But eventually that network widened, and I started meeting people who had more capacity, who were like, oh, well, if you're doing this is exactly the person you need to know. It's all just that community building, and it takes time. But the beautiful thing about it is, by the time we raised our funding, I had this network of people in this community that I would never have met if I hadn't done this. So even when, we were past the point of fundraising, I could go back to that beautiful network and be like, now I'm looking for this. And someone would be like, oh, let me put this out in the newsletter at my organization and do a call out for kitchen chairs or whatever the thing is. So it's, regardless of how much money you raise doing that, is the best thing you can do to start just rooting into your community and learning about who there is supporting the arts, who and how and what they care about, and what their, different people give for different reasons, and starting to learn that landscape of nonprofit giving and arts funding, which is a very different world, but it's such an easier conversation, I think, for filmmakers. I felt this way. I hated going into pitch meetings where you're like, picture this, this scene, this actor, and it'll make you millions of dollars. And then it just feels exhausting. And it feels like you're trying to pitch something that's a total unknown, because art is so subjective. And no matter how confident we are that something is a good package, it doesn't mean, like, we cannot predict how a film will perform. And we pretend we can. But when you're going into a meeting like this, it's not about, let me tell you how I'm going to make you all this money. It's about saying, let me tell you how your money that you're going to be giving away anyway could make a huge impact to a community you care about by putting it into something that I'm really passionate about, and kind of going in with no attachment. It's just like, this is what I care about. This is what I'm doing. Like, does that interest you?
Yeah.
Yes, no, either way is fine. But then a lot of the times it was like, this isn't for me, but let me introduce you to Carol because I feel like she would love this. It's just, especially if you're in a smaller community or even a smaller pocket of LA, if it's like you can focus in on an area and just find those people who are, they have money, they have means, and what they love to do is give it to supporting women, supporting the arts, and then just start there.
Yeah, that makes sense. I have a question as a writer, from a writer's perspective. When you're writing a screenplay, and it helps that you're an actress as well, and we don't have that. Like, when you actually are filming a scene, like, does it, or how do I word this? Like, how do you know it's gonna work? Like, do you have a table read before you go into? I don't know what I'm entirely asking, but just like, have there been surprises about when you write something versus filming something? Like, does it always work? I don't know if that makes sense.
I think the best advice I can give is to be very flexible, because what I have found is that almost without exception, once you get actors reading the lines, once you get in the room, things change. And oftentimes it's me as the writer who's like, nope, what I wrote does not work because you're playing it a different way than I thought you would. And now it changes the whole dynamic of the scene. But that's the fun part to me, because if you can set the framework with the script, but be flexible to sort of the magic of inspiration, whether it come from an actor who's like, I don't feel like I would say it like that. Or now that I'm here, like you said, I'm feeling angry, but I'm actually feeling really sad. How does that change the scene? And if you can pivot with that, it always makes the movie better. At least that's been my experience.
Yeah.
And that happens at every phase. So it happens, at the table read phase when you first meet the actors, if you can do that. It happens when you're on set, happens again when you sit down with the editor, because the editor will say things or see things that you maybe wouldn't have seen because you're too close to it. Mm-hmm. And so I think all of those outside perspectives are part of what makes this medium so fascinating, because we can't make it by ourselves. We need a team. And so I think the more we can bring on the people that we know we can trust and then empower them to do what they're great at, it always makes the project better than what I had in my head.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Just sometimes I wonder, and I think that's just through like seeing people perform it, like, is this going to be funny? Like, is this as amusing to others as it is to me, kind of question.
Some of that is the casting, and some of that is just honestly just being vulnerable. And like when you're in the room and the actors read it, and if it doesn't land, just being like, well, that didn't land. What would be funnier than that? And then working with them and letting them kind of help you. Actors love to give their input. We do. We can't help ourselves. It's like they'll have a perception of the character and they'll have ideas. And so again, I think the more you can just allow it to be a living, breathing thing and not be too attached to anything you've written, all will be well.
Yeah, that's cool. Have things, just on that same note, like, have things changed dramatically? Like, has a scene changed dramatically when you went to film Ingress or Inheritance, or did it mostly stick to the script at that point?
So in Ingress, I think the thing that surprised me the most, so I cast my friend Johnny Farrow in the role of Toby, who is my husband character. Yeah. And I had this vision of Toby in my head and how the scenes would go and what the audience would feel and what Riley would feel in those, kind of this sense of like, oh, he's like, everyone knows they're not right for each other. Like, this isn't meant to be, obviously, whatever. But Johnny played him in such an endearing way that as I got into these scenes with him, I started being like, oh shit, this is so much more complex than I wrote, because like I'm feeling really conflicted in a scene where I thought Riley would be feeling really clear. I was feeling really sad or really like confused. And it made, in my opinion, it made it so much richer, because there is in life, right? Like it's rarely just one thing or the other. So it was like all of that confusion and being drawn to and repelled from and the confusion of it all, like that's so human. And I think sometimes we don't know until we get someone in there and we get in the room. So the whole Toby Riley relationship was the one that surprised me the most. And we had a couple scenes that changed because of just technical issues. Like there was one scene that I had written that to be a driving scene, and my cinematographer rigged, it was at night, and I was supposed to be driving the Jeep, and he rigged this, whole contraption on the front of the car that would have both a light and the camera. And it took him hours to do. We were running out of time. I got in the car, I started to drive it, and I was like, no, absolutely not. I cannot see anything. I can't possibly like focus. And so we all kind of freaked out. And then we ended up just parking the car on the side of the road. And Aviva, you've seen the film. So that scene at the end where Toby and Riley, have their final scene, like that was originally a driving scene for the first half of it. So it became this very still, intimate, quiet scene in a car, which actually I think was so much better and so much more focused on like what was going on in the scene. But I didn't know until we got there. And I honestly probably would have stuck with it, except that it technically just was not possible. But I'm so happy with what it ended up being instead.
Yeah.
So cool. It sounds like you write like a couple different genres. Like, is there one like that you are like most drawn to, or one that you haven't done yet that you're hoping to like do soon?
I'm a bit genre agnostic, but I do tend to gravitate towards dramas, like thriller, dramas with a thrillery, supernaturally kind of element. I like getting into the stuff. I like stories about characters going through a journey. So it's like they start one place and they go through an internal journey and end up somewhere else. So I feel like, Ingress was obviously science fiction. Inheritance was more of a straight family drama with a little bit of like ghosty, thrillery stuff in it. And then I have a sort of witchy feminist Western I'm working on. I have an idea that I've been bouncing around that I want to do at some point that's a horror film based around my sort of childhood ghost in Santa Fe, which was La Llorona, the weeping woman, and kind of taking like a Grendel sort of approach to the Frankenstein monster, which is like humanizing the monster kind of a story. So I feel like that, I like to play with different genres, but I always tend to come back to like the humanizing, the human journey, kind of very character first type of content.
Yeah. I want to add, Ingress obviously is not a rom-com, but I did find the romance very touching. I don't want to spoil anything, but I found the ending, like I cried. It was very satisfying and moving. So I will say that.
And I do love a love story. I love a love story.
Now we're going to pivot to some rapid fire questions that we always ask every guest about rom-coms and our favorites. So our first question is, what is your favorite rom-com and why?
I thought a lot about this. So I think I will say Amelie. Because Amelie, I just think is like a perfect movie. And I think it's a rom-com, but it's also just such a unique, way to film a movie, and it just inspired me a lot growing up.
Yeah,
I love that movie.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Do you have a favorite? Well, I guess we have this written as, do you have a favorite rom-com trope to write? But like, do you just, since you don't write too many rom-coms, like it's just like trope in general, I guess?
I think, so the moment I love to write, and I think it applies to a rom-com, is the moment where the first time they almost kiss, but they don't. That moment where like the tension changes and all of a sudden you feel a thing you didn't feel before, but it doesn't quite go anywhere. I think that's a really fun one.
The pauses, the hesitation.
So, you have a favorite rom-com outfit, or it can be just like an outfit in a film, if depending on
like a character.
The question.
Yeah.
I think I have to go with Cher in Clueless and her awesome early 2000s closet, or was it the 90s? I don't even remember. The
amazing.
The dress me computer thing.
Do you have a favorite line or a moment from a rom-com?
So Ever After, which I don't know if it completely qualifies as a rom-com, but let's just pretend it does. I love the moment where she says to Leonardo da Vinci, she's like, "A bird may love a fish, signore, but where would they live?" And he said, "Then I shall have to build you wings."
I love that movie. I watch it like once a year.
That is such a good
perfect movie, honestly. I just
so good. And her grand entrance at the ball is just
I was gonna say, as soon as you said Ever After, that was my first visual in my mind.
So good. We would love to talk to Drew Barrymore, please.
Totally.
Have you seen any rom-coms that you'd recommend lately? And you can also, it films too, but if we can start with rom-coms.
Yes, and I think I'm going to forget the title, but it was the Anne Hathaway rom-com where she is like in love with the pop star boy who's a lot younger than her. The Thought of You, or the
Idea of You, right?
The Idea of You. The title was hard because I felt like the title had nothing to do with the movie, and so I have a really hard time remembering it.
Yeah,
I like the title, but like it doesn't mean anything to me. Once I watched the film, I was like, why that title?
Yeah, I think she does say it at one point, right?
Oh, does she?
I think in some conversation they say like, "Oh, I've just fell in love with the idea of you," and that's like, it's like something like that.
I agree that there've been some like vague titles lately in the rom-com world. This is an interesting observation. Like, nobody wants this, like, that new show.
Right.
Everyone has asked me about it because it's a rom-com show. Nobody can remember the title. They're like, I think it's like something, I don't know.
Yeah.
So titles are important.
They are. I loved that show also, by the way. I thought that
was really good.
So sweet. And I love seeing a healthy relationship portrayed, because we don't see that a lot, where people actually work through the awkward moments instead of just getting mad at each other and walking away.
Yeah, people aren't just like screaming at each other all the time. I was like, this is really refreshing. I'm like feeling positive while I'm watching something.
Weird.
Exactly.
Okay, so I think the last one we have is just like, if you had all the money, you've got all the funding in the world, like, is there a movie that you would make, either one that you've written but haven't made yet, or an idea you have, like, what would be the, like, if you had the $1 million budget?
I think at this moment, and I've just finished a draft of this, it's my script called Ash and Ember, which is a sort of it's an 1800s Western, kind of exploring the witch trials and what it means to be a witch, and that kind of, feminine power, female intuition, and kind of how it was misconstrued and women were persecuted. And yeah, so it's kind of a witchy, magical period piece, and I really want to make it.
I love that. I just recently watched Hocus Pocus and Hocus Pocus 2. And I was feeling very like, yeah, we need more movies. We've talked about this before.
Yes.
Right? We feel like there's no like witchy rom-com, but I think something like that sounds really interesting.
Yeah, I'm in that mood too. That'd be great.
Halloween's approaching.
Yeah,
exactly. I think we've seen a
We're
lot of witchy movies that are like Hocus Pocus or Practical Magic or like Agatha All Along, which just came out, which it's one particular view of witches that's kind of campy and kind of, you know, tropey. And to me, it's like, I think with this script, I'm interested, as I always seem to be, in kind of reversing that trope and really getting into like the guts of a thing and like, where does that come from? Like, what is magic? And is it, you know, is it magic? Is it real? Do we all have it? Just kind of that humanizing of the concept, you know, into a more grounded sort of story.
Yeah, that's awesome. Could it be filmed on Bainbridge? Is that how
Not on Bainbridge, but in Washington. I think I have to leave Bainbridge now so that all my films don't look exactly the same.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So I think we're going to branch out. I think this one we're thinking Washington with the river and the forest, and then possibly going outward to Montana or somewhere similar that has like an established Western town, because that's such an important element. And it's, if you don't have the infrastructure for it, it can be very expensive to build.
Go to Roslyn,
where we can shoot
like over by Yakima. There's that little it's called Roslyn, right? Have you ever been out there? It's got like the old, like cute little buildings, just
really?
Roslyn, Washington. I feel like that's the
is it like is it an actual town, or is it a
I mean it's like a very small, it's like 4 little like buildings, but they're like exactly that sort of like old Western look. Interesting. But yeah, the more you go out into like Yakima area, there's like river and like all that kind of like more Western.
That's where we gotta
stuff.
Gotta go to the
river. That's awesome. And finally, can you talk about what projects we can watch, like what you're working on next, just all the self-promo stuff.
How to like stay in touch with you and find out more about your films.
Amazing. So Ingress, as we talked about, is currently streaming in the US. It will expand more widely. We're just not exactly sure when, but for now, if you're in the US, you can watch it on Amazon Prime, Fandango at home, Vimeo on demand. Inheritance, the second film we shot on Bainbridge, is currently doing its festival circuit. So this weekend, it's actually showing at the Twin Cities Festival in Minneapolis. Minneapolis.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's where my sister lives.
Tell her to go Sunday.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, I'll tell her to
go. Sunday. And then we'll be here at the Bainbridge Film Festival, November 9th and 10th, for 2 screenings. We've signed with an international sales agent for Inheritance, so we'll see where it ends up going from there, which is exciting. Beyond that, we just talked about Ash and Ember, which is the next project I'm hoping to film direct in Washington. And Sienna and I are also working on raising the funds to start this emerging filmmakers program we want to do to support early career female filmmakers. So that's something definitely to keep an eye on. As soon as we have the resources, we'll announce it wide. But the best way to kind of keep up with me is, so I'm on Instagram. It's rachel.noel.james is my handle. Emergence Films is also on Instagram, and that's a great way to keep up with us. emergencefilms.us is our website, and we post about all our projects on there, as well as the filmmaker program and any updates to be had there.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you so much. This was
so much.
This was very inspiring. I was telling Aviva this morning that I was like, I feel like I've been going through that a lot, where it's just like, I just want to like write what I want to write and like make my own thing. So then when I realized this was our interview today, I was like, this is the perfect person I need to hear from today. So thank you for all your advice. It's it's inspiring.
And please keep me posted as you guys get stuff going. And if you hit snags or just, I highly, highly suggest you do it. Just go make something. You will not regret it no matter what happens with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Well, appreciate your time and have a great rest of your Friday.
Likewise. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
This has been an episode of When Isabeau Met Aviva. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to stay up to date with our episodes, please subscribe. Bonus points if you leave us a positive review. You can follow us on Instagram at When Isabel Met Abiba and on Twitter at Isabel Met Abiba. We're both on Instagram and Twitter, which is currently now called X. If you have any questions or need advice about your screenwriting career or just want to obsess over rom-coms with us, please feel free to reach out. My Instagram handle is just at Isabel_K_T, and Aviva is more organized. Hers is just her name.
Yes, correct. It'll be in the show notes, but yeah, Aviva, Peltin.
And yeah, we look forward to chatting with you there. And thank you to everyone who has left us reviews lately. We love them. We are obsessed with them. So thank you. We appreciate them. We need to like post those on social media at some point.
We do. Yeah, we really appreciate it. And if you don't even have any time, just go on Spotify if you like our podcast and just give us 5 stars. It really does make our podcast get more exposure. I think we're up to like 17.
Yeah, we really want to get to interview more like bigger people too, even though we've loved all the like people we've been interviewing.
Yes.
I think reviews help us just like get to the next level with our podcast.
We look more legitimate.
Make us look more legit when we reach out to Mindy Kaling and Kristen Bell and their team just rejects us because we aren't legit enough yet. We will be someday.
Okay, bye everyone, and thanks for listening, and we will see you very soon.
Bye.
Bye.